Each candidate will now be given up to 3 minutes to introduce themselves, and then we will go on to the questions. Our timekeeper, Jorge, in front of you, will hold up a yellow card to let you know that you have 30 seconds left to speak, and a red card to show you that you have 15 seconds left. When you hear the word stop, your time is up. We'll start with Omar.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Omar Aquino, candidate for Alderman in obviously 36th Ward here. I just want to first and foremost thank everyone for being here, taking time out of your day to listen to Gilbert and I in our differing opinions of how to move not only the 36th Ward forward, but the city of Chicago. And so I want to especially thank the church here for hosting the Narragansett Church of God. Pastor Floyd, thank you again. And then the Bel-Montclare Community Organization, Alonzo Zaragoza, thank you so much for putting this on. Jorge Felix for helping today, and all others that helped in some way get the word out there and try to inform our neighbors of this great discussion that we're going to have tonight. My name again is Omar Aquino. I'm born and raised on the northwest side here in the city of Chicago, actually very close to this community. My godparents actually live just a block away on Nagle on the 2200 block, so I'm familiar with this community. I'm running for alderman because I spent my entire career in public servitude. I consider myself a public servant. And quite simply, what you're here for is to hear my ideas and my platform. So my platform is simple. I believe we need better city services for a world-class city that we are in. Chicago is a world-class city, and we deserve the services of such a city. And so in terms of education, I'm a product of Chicago Public Schools. I actually first attended, not too far away from here, Mary Lyon School, and then transferred over to Sarah Language Academy, and that's where I graduated from elementary school. Then I went to Lincoln Park High School. And so I'm for an elected school board. I'm for having professional educators teach our students and our kids in the community. I am proposing, once I get in, if elected, I would propose a moratorium on opening new charter schools in the Chicagoland area, or in Chicago rather. I'm for reasonable class sizes, and beyond that, in terms of public safety, it's a big issue. Just recently here, we had someone who was shot. In the 36th Ward since the beginning of the year, we had 2 deaths of young teens, a 13-year-old nearby and a 16-year-old on the northern portion of the ward. So it's a great concern of the public safety, not only citywide, but here locally in the 36th Ward. And so I'm for having more police officers. However, that doesn't solve all our issues. So I believe that we need more after-school programming at our schools and at our parks. We need year-round employment services, employment opportunities for our teenagers. But yet, the biggest issue in our city is the city budget that's impacted by the public pension liability that we currently have. And so if we don't attack that and try to generate reasonable revenue in a fair and balanced way, we cannot provide the services that we all deserve. And so, like I said, I hope to earn your support, and I hope to have your support on April 7th. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gilbert Villegas. I want to thank everyone for coming out today. I want to thank Alonzo for moderating, Pastor Floyd for allowing us to use your facility in the 36th Ward. I think that this race, the 36th Ward, is a very interesting race in that the 31st Ward has garnered a lot of the attention, but finally the Chicago Tribune has highlighted and kind of put in context what the 36th Ward race is all about. And so if you allow me, I'll read a quick paragraph from the Chicago Tribune. 36th Ward, this northwest side race is a political junkie's delight. Cook County Assessor Joe Berrios, stunned by the defeat of his daughter, former Rep. Tony Berrios, in the 2014 Illinois House race, is trying to defend his political base here. He's backing Omar Aquino, who once worked for Tony Berrios. Aquino would need a crash course in everything. Gilbert Villegas, a business consultant and former Marine, has the backing of U.S. Representative Luis Gutierrez and Cook County Commissioner Jesus Garcia. There's just no comparison. Villegas has held high positions at the Illinois Department of Transportation and the Illinois Capital Development Board, and is far better prepared for the job. He makes a good argument that he would encourage neighborhood business development, and Villegas is strongly endorsed. So that's the Chicago Tribune's word saying that I'm strongly endorsed based on my experience. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, a Teamster for 10 years where I fought to make sure that drivers and dock workers, their contracts are being adhered to. After 10 years with the Teamsters, I was appointed as a deputy director with the Illinois Department of Transportation, where I oversaw over $1.5 billion in capital construction projects and made sure that minority and women-owned businesses were participating on publicly funded contracts. After 5 years, I was recruited to the Hispanic American Construction Industry Association, a trade association where I represented over 300 companies, and passed 2 pieces of legislation that ultimately became law that leveled the playing field, once again, for minority and women-owned businesses. After 3 years with ASEA, I was appointed to be the chief of staff at the Capital Development Board, where once again I oversaw 140 people and a $3.9 billion capital program. So when we're talking about experience, when we're talking about moving the 36th Ward forward, I've got that experience. And that's why I'm here today, to talk about my experience and talk about my vision. Public safety is my #1 issue. And that's why the Fraternal Order of Police has endorsed my candidacy. And that's why the Chicago Tribune said that I'll be tough on crime. Again, I have a community policing plan. I plan to use my office as a conduit for the community and the police department. We need to form a partnership. We need to build that trust between the community and the police department. Thank you.
There have been at least 5 reported shootings within 3 blocks of this church in the last 2 months. Both candidates want safe streets and want to hire more police. But what specific steps are you going to take as alderman to improve safety in the community? Gilbert, followed by Omar. You have 2 minutes to answer the question.
Again, public safety is my #1 issue. I have a community policing plan. I have a plan, community policing plan, and that's why the Fraternal Order of Police, as well as the Chicago Tribune, has said that I'm going to be tough on crime, because I plan to use my office as a conduit between the community and the police department. What's going on out there is that there's a lot of kids, a lot of youth that just don't have any activities. I plan to take a look at the property that's located on Fullerton by Hanson Park, convert that into a community center. It's strategically located right between Hanson Park, Prieto, Prospect Vocational, and I plan to use that facility to develop programs for these young kids that don't have any activities. My office, again, is going to be very proactive in making sure that we build that trust within the community and the police department. It's very sad to see all these fatalities and these shootings going on in this community, but it's because of lack of jobs, a lack of activities for these kids, and so we need to get a lot more aggressive, and I plan on working with the community to develop these programs, and again, working with the police department.
Criminal justice is what I have a background in. That's what I graduated with, a bachelor's of one of my degrees from Loyola University. And so in terms of public safety, it's a great concern, not only in the city, but also in the 36th Ward on the northwest side. Our boundaries or our communities don't save anyone from crime. And so I was endorsed by Sheriff Tom Dart and Gun Violence Prevention PAC because of my plans. I do want to have a true community policing available both in the 25th District and the 16th, and I'll be working with local commanders to make sure that our communities are safe. Like I said initially, I'm a proponent for hiring more police officers. I believe we at minimum need 500 more police officers on our streets to make sure that we have safer streets. However, I know that that's not the only solution. We can't work on any of these issues in silos because we can't. Education, economic development, all these other issues impact our public safety. And so we need to make sure that we have great opportunities for businesses to come in here and have safe streets. And the way you do that is working on all these issues. So in terms of economic development, I want to make sure that we have year-round jobs that are provided to teenagers so that we can encourage them to become paying serviceable citizens in our communities, and after school programs at our schools and parks. But we need parks and schools that have the adequate funding to provide these things. And so again, I believe that in terms of public safety, we have to work not only necessarily with hiring more police officers, but also on the other issues of economic development and our education.
Thank you. Again, I will inform you that this is not a candidate forum to support your candidate. It's an informational one. Please hold your applause until the end of the forum so we can get through the most questions as possible. The 36th Ward needs a 24/7 alderman. Will you have any outside jobs aside from alderman? Where will your aldermanic service office be at? What will be the operating hours of the office? How many ward nights will you have? Will your employees all be residents of the 36th Ward? How will you choose the employees? 2 minutes. Omar.
Those were a lot of questions in one, so I'll try to get through all of them. But quite simply, I'm going to be a full-time alderman. There's no questions about that. I'm currently a full-time candidate because I believe that what the people of the 36th Ward need are someone that's going to be there without question here in the city of Chicago, here in the 36th Ward, that is available, present. And so our office, our campaign office is currently at 6325 West Belmont, which is on Belmont and Narragansett. We'd like to keep that there. I certainly, once if elected, would be looking to hire residents of the 36th Ward to serve the communities. A lot of people within our ward still don't know that there are changes that happen with the maps and whatnot, so we want people that understand our communities, that understand the changes and the impact that it has on their neighbors. And I apologize, Alonzo, you're gonna have to go through a few of those questions.
How many more ward nights will you have?
Okay. In terms of, do you mind if you could just repeat one, and I'll answer one at a time?
No problem.
In terms of ward nights, we certainly will have at bare minimum one ward night a week. But more than importantly, I think in terms of what people want as a representative, as their alderman, is someone that's open and accessible. So we would obviously have means of communication with social media and so forth. But I think the best way, and I've seen it on, and I've spoke to neighbors about this, is that it's nothing like when you have an elected official that's coming to your door, not when it's times to gain their political advantage and try to earn their support to get their vote. But more importantly, have somebody there that's committed to knocking on doors all the time. And so I will be doing that because I think it's a lot better to have a conversation at someone's door and talk about the issues in their community and on their block presently, and not necessarily just over email or any other things like that.
Do you want me to read it again, Gilbert?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Will you have any outside jobs aside from alderman? Where will your aldermanic service office be at? What will be the operating hours of the office? How many ward nights will you have? Will your employees all be residents of the 36th Ward? How will you choose the employees?
So yes, I'm going to be a full-time alderman, campaigning full-time right now as well. My office, if elected, will be by the Brickyard. I think that the Brickyard is strategically located. If you look where how the map is drawn, it's like a horseshoe or a U, and so it makes sense to put it as close to the middle as possible. And plus, Brickyard is a nice landmark that everyone's kind of familiar with. And I always joke that afterwards, after you come see me, you just go over to Target and purchase some of your goods for the week. I'll be having ward nights at least one night a week. Our hours will be your traditional hours of 9 to 5. On ward night, it will be a little bit later. How I plan to hire my employees, I'm looking for the most professional employees. Customer service is going to be my #1 issue. I want to make sure that the constituents, the taxpayers, when they're coming to their office, that they're treated professionally. And I will be looking for residents from all over the 36th Ward to apply to these positions, as well as looking for some nice young talent that's coming from college with some technical and IT skills, so that way, again, we can take a look at some virtual office hours and other things that we use technology to our advantage. How will I choose my employees? I will put ads out there and interview them and make sure that, again, they're not related to me, no nepotism. I also plan to have a rotating ward night where once a month the ward office will go to the precincts, the neighboring precincts, and then we would deal with those issues specifically. I'll bring the commissioner, whatever commissioner it is that we're having a lot of problems with from that department, bring them out there so that way they can hear clearly right from the constituents what the issues are, and they can give us a resolution.
Thank you. The south end of the 36th ward needs a strong public library. The nearest one is hidden away in a park, small and underfunded. It is not comparable to libraries in other communities. As Alderman, what do you plan to do to make sure that all of our residents have access to a strong and local public library? 1 minute, Gilbert.
So as it relates to the libraries, that's actually, those are actually built under what's called the Public Building Commission. And so that's a separate entity, and given my familiarity with the Public Building Commission, I will take a look and work with the executive director there to find out what their long-term plan is as it relates to libraries. But I'm a big proponent of making sure that we do have these facilities and that they're not just used during regular hours, that these buildings are utilized for other types of activities just besides the library. I look at it more as a community center, and I want to make sure that these children that are going there to study, but there's also some other programs there, maybe some senior programs there as well. But definitely, I'm a big proponent of making sure that we do have these new facilities, and I'll be working closely with the Public Building Commission.
Omar?
So I live in the southern portion of this ward, and I agree with you, Alonso, as we are neighbors, that there's certainly need for new public library down in the southern portion of the 36. There's also a need in the Galewood community as well, as what used to be a public library there is now in the basement of a Sayre Park. And so these are things that are needed throughout the entire 36th ward. In addition to that, I would look to try to get a public space, public library, community center in the 36th ward. I believe that, like I said, in terms of after-school programs, we need them both at our parks, at our schools, and public spaces like the community center. But beyond that, we also need improvements, not only to bring in dollars for a new public library, but improvements of those facilities that are already existing in our communities, such as our parks, where if you looked at the 36th ward, our parks are suffering. All throughout in the north and the southern and the western area. And we need to make sure that we're getting adequate funding, not only from public money, but also private grants and things like that to get some money into our ward.
Thank you. We have a problem with illegal parking in the alleys, illegal conversion of single-family homes, and loud music playing at all hours of the night in our ward. As Alderman, what specific actions are you going to take to address those three issues? 2 minutes. We'll start with Omar.
Alonso, I apologize because it's a multi-question, but illegal parking, illegal conversions, and
loud music.
And loud music, okay. And loud music. So, in terms of illegal parking and illegal conversions, what I believe that the role as an alderman's office is you have your staff there, specifically, especially with streets and sanitation, you have a superintendent that can go and make sure that in terms of illegal parking and conversions, those things are reported to the necessary departments, especially with illegal conversion. You want to talk with the building department and so forth. In terms of loud music, I mean, we really have to have a sort of community approach at this, not necessarily only getting the police department involved, but you have to actively get out there as an alderman and sometimes mediate some of these issues, because we live in a community and so we live with neighbors. And we don't want our first response to just call 911 and you have neighbors that are literally fighting with neighbors. So I think you have to have a hands-on approach, not only as alderman yourself, but also have a staff and an office that is available to sort of mediate some of these problems. But again, back to the parking and conversion issue, we want to make sure that we're dealing with the appropriate departments within the city and holding them accountable, making sure that we're resolving these issues in our ward.
Thank you.
As it relates to the illegal parking, obviously that would be an issue for the police department. And if the police department's not handling that issue, then our office will step in and put a little friendly call into the commander, let him know that that issue is becoming my issue, and so as a result, it's going to be his issue to resolve. As it relates to the illegal conversions, that's something where I would get into the building department to take a look at maybe some violations. Again, making sure that the Chicago Fire Department is taking a look at it as well for safety. Again, those are public safety issues that we need to make sure that these renters that would be in these facilities are safe. Loud music, again, it's just a matter of calling our office if it's late at night. Probably shooting an email to our virtual office. Our office will go ahead and in turn contact the police department if the neighbors don't want to get involved and have any disputes. But again, I think that friendly conversation from the alderman's office to the constituent, letting them know that they need to be courteous and respect their neighbors, I think would go a long way. Again, our office is going to be very active in making sure that the lines of communication are open from my office to the community, and we're going to have some professional staff there that will be able to address these issues.
We have a serious lack of opportunities for our young adults in the ward. There are few jobs available, no community centers for them to use in the ward, and the parks and schools offer very little programming for them and never in the evening. What specific plans do you have to make sure that young adults have something to do in the ward as a productive alternative to being on the streets? 2 minutes, Gilbert.
Okay, so as it relates to parks, I'm on the Shibona Park Advisory Council, and we were very successful last year in bringing a new playground. I'm also on the Bell Park Advisory Council, where this year, if you drive down Old Park, you'll see that there's already construction going on for a brand new playground. And that's something that, as a dad with 2 boys, I like to see my sons, especially my 7-year-old, playing out in the playground, and especially one that didn't have an F rating. And that's why I got really involved in the park advisory councils. As relates to the opportunities, I've already been in discussion with the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce, as well as World Business Chicago, to find out what types of companies are actually thinking about expanding. And then Chicagoland Chamber, making sure, talking to them to find out the corporations that may have some summer internships, whether they're paid or non-paid. I plan to take a look at bringing on some interns into my office, probably unpaid because of our budget. But nevertheless, we want to make sure that these young men and women have opportunities that are exposed to the workforce. So again, as a small business owner, I understand that we got to train these youth and get them some experience in the corporate world. And so again, like I said, I've been working closely with the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce to take a look at some of the opportunities that will be coming up in 2015.
Well, this is exactly what I was referring to earlier in terms of my platform. I think we need year-round employment opportunities for teens. There's a program out in LA that was started in the late 80s, early 90s called Homeboys Bakery. It ended up becoming Homeboys Industries. And essentially, their theme is nothing stops a bullet quite like a job. And I agree fully with that. We want productive alternatives to gangs, essentially, and giving young teens and young kids an opportunity to gain leadership roles and whatnot within our own community. So what I would do specifically is I would reach out to our local chambers and our local businesses and try to find if there's some opportunities with their businesses, either small, medium-sized, or large business within the 36, which we have lots of all, and see if there's opportunities for our teenagers, especially when we have 3 different high schools here in the 36th ward. And so we want to be able to provide them jobs, first and foremost. Community centers. We absolutely do not have community centers here in the 36th ward. I think we need better funding for either community centers, our parks, and our schools so that we can have after-school programs. But I believe you can take a look at Haas Park. Haas Park is a park on Fullerton, just east of California. And what they did was they did public-private partnerships in order to bring funding to their park. And so that's exactly what we would want to do is if the city or the state or the county doesn't have the adequate funding to provide us these resources to have these help our community grow, we want to reach out and see if there's any private grants available that we can make sure that we're bringing in those dollars and having public dollars and private dollars to make sure that we have those community centers, those adequate services for our parks and so forth.
Thank you. Rumor has it that a number of charter school proposals are going to be brought up for the Northwest Side. Aside from being in favor of a charter school moratorium, which you both are, will you actively resist and fight against all additional charter schools from coming into the 36th Ward? 1 minute, Omar.
Yes. Simply, I believe that, so I have no sort of qualm with charter schools itself. My issues with charter schools is, it's not about the difference between choice, it's that we have public money that's going to a private entity to run schools, that those private entities aren't interested in making sure that we have professional educators in our schools. So I'm proposing a moratorium in the city for charter schools. I'd like to make sure that we have teachers that are unionized, that have the ability to join a union, that we have professional educators that are teaching students, and not just someone out of college that did anything. They need an education. They need to have a background in education to be able to teach our kids.
Rumor has it that a number of charter school proposals are going to be brought up for the Northwest Side. Aside from being in favor of a charter school moratorium, which you both are, will you actively resist and fight against all additional charter schools from coming into the 36th Ward?
The short answer is yes. As it relates to the charter schools, the way that they're set up, we need to take a look at changing some legislation down in Springfield. They're for-profit entities. We need to change them to not-for-profit entities. We need to make sure that, again, we're focusing on the students, the parents, and the teachers. The students getting a great education, the parents realizing that their kids are getting a good education, and teachers making sure they have the right to collectively bargain. So yes, will definitely resist and fight for neighborhood schools and make sure that these public dollars are being spent correctly.
Thank you. Both of your campaigns have received thousands of dollars from the same developers that have made neighborhoods like Logan Square and Pilsen unaffordable for middle-income residents. What are you going to do to prevent longtime 36th Ward residents from getting priced out of our homes? And what are you going to do to ensure that 4, 8, and 10-unit condominiums don't start appearing on blocks that are traditionally reserved for single-family homes? 2 minutes. Start with Omar.
Well, I believe gentrification is certainly an issue, especially when you look at Belmont, Cragen, and the Hermosa area. We want to make sure that if we do have development, especially with housing development, throughout any part of the 36th Ward, that there's a conversation with the residents in that ward. We want to make sure that people aren't priced out absolutely from their homes, from where they live currently, and so that that all of a sudden rental rates and other things start shooting up. And so what I would say is that we need to make sure that there's legislation and that we have an alderman there that will make sure that if there is any development, specifically with housing, that we have set-asides for mixed income housing, ensuring that people that live currently in our community are able to still afford to live there. And we certainly want to make sure that we have resources and services and growth in the 36th Ward always, but we want to make sure that we're not just pushing people out and not being able to live their lives and raise their families in the communities. Specifically, I would say this is a biggest issue if you look at Belmont, Cragen, and Hermosa.
We want to make sure that as these new developments come about, that the community is engaged. I plan to have a development committee in my office made up of residents of the 36th Ward. I'm going to be very transparent as relates to the developments for the 36th Ward. I want to make sure that we have affordable housing. I want to make sure that there's a certain percentage that's set aside for these affordable housing units. I want to make sure that, again, communication. We're communicating with the community what the plans are. I want to make sure that there's parking, adequate parking for any development that occurs. But again, the key to development and making sure that there's no gentrification or it's limited is communication. Communicating to the residents about the projects that are on the horizon and making sure that they understand what the vision is for the 36th Ward. But again, everyone in, no one out.
What specific actions are you going to take as alderman to make sure that all of the schools in the ward, public, charter, and faith-based, improve during your 4 years in office? 2 minutes, Gilbert. What specific actions are you going to take as alderman to make sure that all of the schools in the ward, public, charter, and faith-based, improve during your 4 years in office?
Again, so I want to make sure that, again, neighborhood schools have the resources they need. I want to utilize my office, not just as a service office, but also while we're trying to get a community center up to talk about mentoring and tutoring, I want to make sure that my office in the interim provides those types of services. So that way those kids that are have challenges at school, have some place to go. So that way, again, we can mentor them and tutor them, because I want to make sure that the neighborhood schools are getting the resources they need. I want to make sure that the other schools, whether it be charter or private, are living up, because again, the charter schools are receiving public dollars. We want to make sure that as taxpayers, we're getting a good return on our investment, and we want to make sure that we're holding them accountable. My office is going to be open. It's going to be an awesome office. We're going to be working real close with the community. So again, look forward to making sure that these kids have the necessary resources. And so that's how my office is going to be utilized.
Simply, I would create advisory councils, and that's what I have an experience in, not only in the state, but on the federal side. I would say one of the first things is creating an education advisory council that we make sure that administrators, teachers, parents, all those perspectives are taken into account when discussing things, especially trying to move ordinances forward in the city council, and making sure that we have the adequate resources available in our schools. Another advisory council I would be creating is a youth advisory council. And I believe it's very important to get our youth mobilized, have their perspectives heard as well, even if they're of age to vote or not, because they have a perspective as well as a student in a school to voice and have a voice of saying what their needs are as well. And so I would have an open line of communication with my schools, with the administrators, with the teachers and so forth. I'll be visiting the schools often. And so we would always make sure that we are taking the professionals, educators' points of views and making sure that we are providing them the adequate resources necessary to have providing a great education to our students. And I would just hyper-locally just say that one of the things that I would certainly am committed to doing is specifically at Hanson Park. They're working on trying to have reasonable class sizes, and that's what we're trying to accomplish throughout the city in the 36th ward. So I would try to find generate dollars for them, either through the state, county, private donations, whatnot, to make sure that they have the spaces available to make sure that we have adequate, reasonable classroom sizes there.
There's a big homeless population, both veteran and non-veterans in the ward. As alderman, what are you going to do to provide resources for those residents that are most in need of assistance? 1 minute, Omar.
Well, we certainly need to make sure that we are we provide living facilities and so forth, and resources and services, not only for veterans, but for all homeless. There's a big population of homelessness that are veterans. There's also many of the LGBT community that are homeless as well. So we want to make sure that we have housing opportunities and growth, development here in the 36th ward. I believe we need more senior housing as well here in the 36th ward to make sure that there isn't a senior that ever feels that they are being pushed out of their home or are unable to live here in the community. So we'd be looking for, trying to find adequate money to bring to our community. We have to make sure that we're working on our city's budget to make sure that we have set aside money for housing projects.
This is something that's very close to my heart. As a veteran, it breaks my heart when you see a homeless veteran, and that's why I'm on the All Chicago Board, which is a board that combats homelessness. President Obama made a pledge by 2015 to end homelessness for veterans, and so there's some federal programs that are available. As alderman, I would take a look and work with my federal partners to kind of find out what are some of these dollars that are available. Try to identify some of the developers that may be doing some of these projects and try to recruit them to the 36th ward. I also want to make sure that these seniors have these senior home residents that are available. But I want to make sure that we're working with our federal partners and trying to identify HUD money as well as money from the Veteran Affairs.
We have a budget problem to fix. What are some of your solutions to fix the budget gaps that Chicago currently faces? And will you vote to raise property taxes? 2 minutes, Gilbert.
So the answer for me is no on property taxes. There's a bunch of other items that we could take a look at. We could take a look at TIF reform. We could take a look at potentially a casino for Chicago. But the bigger picture is not here in Chicago, but actually being dealt in Springfield. It's called the Fair Tax Bill. Illinois is one of the 4 states that does not have a graduated income tax. And as a Chicago alderman, I will be down in Springfield advocating for the city of Chicago to bring additional revenues that would be generated from a graduated income tax. The city of Chicago, we are a donor city. We pay 55 cents on the motor fuel tax, and we only receive 45 cents back on the dollar. So there's a dime that we're leaving down in Springfield, and when you take a look at that, that adds up to hundreds of millions of dollars. Also, income tax. Right now, we're receiving 80 to 90 cents on the dollar. We're leaving 20 cents to 10 cents down in Springfield. We need to make sure that every dollar we pay in income tax, that we're advocating as a city to get that dollar back. Those dollars would then free up some additional revenue that we can take a look at earmarking towards paying down our debt, or taking a look at dedicating some of it to pay down some of this pension. But again, I'm against raising property taxes. The middle class has been hit too hard. The fair tax bill would affect those that make $167,500, and those that make under $50,000 would see a tax cut. So the $50,000 to $164,999 would pay the 3.75 current rate that we're doing now, and then those that make $167,500 would see their income tax generally go up. And I think that's the fair thing to do, and that's why it's called the fair tax bill. So as a city alderman, I'll make sure that we're down in Springfield advocating to make sure that we're level the playing field and advocating for the city of Chicago to capture as many dollars as possible.
In terms of the issue of our city's budget, this is the biggest issue that our city is facing right now, and it's because of the pension liability that we're currently in. I have an idea. I've proposed several things, and it's been part of my platform. I agree. I believe we should have a Chicago casino, do TIF reform, have possibly a LaSalle Street tax, and possibly even a commuter tax. We have to be open to generating revenue in this city. The problem here in the city of Chicago and in the state and arguably throughout this country is that the way we generate revenue at the moment and we tax people has been very inequitable. Those that can afford to pay more are not paying as much as they should, and those that can't are working class families and middle class families, specifically those that live in communities like that in the 36th Ward, are feeling the burden of these revenues. And so I have an idea called the progressive tax swap. It would be swapping out a certain amount of money from regressive fines and fees to a nominal increase in the property tax. So basically, it's if you take a working class home or property in the ward, about $250,000 worth, you would say it's increase it by $50 a year, but offset it by regressive fees like cell phone taxes, gas tax, and other and city sticker fees and so forth, offset that amount. And then so the person that has a property that is $150,000 to $300,000 property will see a reduction in the overall tax they pay to the city. But those that can't afford it, like in the Lincoln Parks of the world, the Streeterville, someone that owns a condo downtown worth millions of dollars, that increase would be substantial in the city. So what you see is we generate more revenue, but not on the backs of working class families. They will see an overall reduction, and I will only vote for that increase if we can do a plan like this, will has an overall reduction of our working class and families, specifically in the 36th Ward.
Thank you, Omar. Could you state concrete ways in which you will make sure that the 36th Ward supports the inclusion and protection of the rights of LGBTQ families and community? 1 minute, Omar.
So first and foremost, I believe, I don't know if I was the only one, I don't know if Alonzo had also submitted a questionnaire, an endorsement from the Windy City Times, but I did and received an A rating. And so we want to make sure that our LGBT community members, our neighbors, the residents here, businesses and so forth, feel included in the community, feel that they're being treated equal, and our office will be open for them just as they're open for anyone else. And so in terms of specific issues, if we're talking about what we want to do with after-school programs in education, we want to make sure that we're working on bullying issues in our school. We're working on the homelessness issues that affect the LGBT community greatly. But at the end of the day, our office will be treating gay and lesbian families and people and business owners the same way. We want to make sure that they feel included in our community. They are a part of our community. Many of the people that have knocked on some of the people that have knocked on their doors are members of these communities, and we want to make sure that they feel that they're being taken care of as well.
Could you state concrete ways in which you will make sure that the 36 Ward supports the inclusion and protection of the rights of LGBTQ families and community?
Yes, our office is going to, again, welcome everyone. This is a community. The 36 Ward is going to be open to everyone. We want to make sure that we're respecting everyone. We want to make sure that we're working with everyone's issues. I've even bantered the idea of making a rainbow flag for Gilbert, Villegas for 36 Ward, but I was shot down on that. But again, the community is going to be, the community is open. Our office is going to be very receptive to everyone. Everyone's a taxpayer. We want to make sure that everyone's getting the services that they deserve. And so my office is definitely going to be receptive to the LGBT community.
Thank you. We need more businesses in the ward along our main streets. What do you plan to do to make sure that our empty storefronts are filled, and how will you work with the community to ensure that those new businesses are a good fit for our community? 2 minutes, Gilbert.
Well, as a small business owner, this is something that I definitely understand. And when we take a look at the 36 Ward, we have a Grand Avenue corridor where I plan to work closely with the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity to identify enterprise zones. I'm going to work closely with the federal government to take a look at hub zones, try to recruit business-like manufacturing along that corridor. Again, I've already been working closely with the Illinois Chamber of Commerce as well as the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce and World Business Chicago to identify those corporations that are looking to move to Chicago, and then more specifically looking for areas that have a lot of real estate. And so the 36 Ward is prime for that light manufacturing. Then we take a look at Fullerton Avenue, where we have about 50,000 vehicles that travel up and down Fullerton Avenue. And I want to make sure that, again, that we're engaging the community, talk about some of the opportunities that they would like to see. I know when I go to watch a soccer game or a football game, that I have to travel sometimes to Division and Damon to some of those nice facilities. And I see my neighbors there, so I'm sure that they would like to not travel all the way down to Division and Damon. So I want to work with them in the community and talk about some of the ideas that they would like to see come to the 36th Ward. Again, by forming a small business committee that would work closely with the Chicagoland Chamber as well as World Business Chicago to talk about some of these companies that want to move to the city of Chicago. And more specifically, I'm going to be a big advocate for recruiting companies to the 36th Ward, given the fact that I have a lot of relationships in the corporate world. I want to make sure that I'm recruiting them, talking to them, and pitching the 36th Ward as a place where it's business friendly. My office is going to be a business incubator to make sure that, again, those businesses that are looking to open up in the 36th Ward are not bogged down by the bureaucracy from the city of Chicago.
Just a few things. In terms of if the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce was interested in the 36th Ward on the northwest side, they would have had businesses here and trying to advocate for us already. So I don't think that's going to necessarily happen. But we should be working with our local chambers, especially, as those are the small business owners of our community, and to making sure that there are the right incentives available, not only to entice entrepreneurs to our ward and our communities, but also to be able to make sure that those that are here can stay here. I currently have an office on Belmont in Narragansett, and across the street there's about 4 vacant storefronts. The building that we're using used to be a double storefront that was empty for about 2 years. just 2 doors down from us is another empty storefront. So this is an issue that is plaguing our ward. We do have a Brickyard, which is great. They put TIF money there to reinvent the Brickyard, and it's great that there's thriving businesses there, but we want to make sure that there are thriving small businesses here in the community. And so one of the things is I've talked about having advisory committees, and I think this is very important because you want to have an open dialogue with your community. And so we would have an advisory economic development committee so that we are talking to small business owners and chambers and so forth within the 36th ward, that we have public meetings when there is talks about public development and bringing businesses into the ward. Not all businesses are the same. We have actually heard that in certain portions of the ward, there are previous aldermen that are trying to in certain businesses that I believe some people would have questionable, would not want necessarily those businesses here in the 36th ward. And so we need to make sure that we are having a discussion with our neighbors and making sure we're bringing in businesses and business owners that are going to be contributors to our community, not just have any type of businesses, pawn shops and the other that are popping up in the 36th ward.
What is your policy on accepting campaign donations from companies, lobbyists, or individuals with pending business before the city council or city council committees? How are you going to ensure that an individual resident is treated just as fairly as a campaign donor is treated? 2 minutes, Omar.
Quite simply, I do not owe, if someone contributes to this campaign, we do not owe them anything. They are contributing to our campaign, and those, especially even volunteers and things like that, I've told everyone, we do not owe anyone anything. This is a campaign to serve the public in the 36th ward, and so everyone will be treated equally. Residents, especially. I mean, they live in the community, but we also need to make sure that we have an open dialogue with our businesses as well. This is part of a community. We need to make sure that we're treating everyone equally. In terms of, can you repeat the question one more?
Yeah, what is your policy on accepting campaign donations from companies, lobbyists, or individuals?
The policy is very simple. We abide by campaign finance laws. Unlike Gilbert here, who has skirted around those campaign finance laws several times. Right now, anyone that has any business owner that has a contract with the city can at most give you $1,500. His friends, who are contractors, have developed a pact so that they can give him 10 times that amount twice. So they are trying to skirt around campaign finance laws. It's not even just a policy, it is a law. We are just abiding by the campaign finance laws set by the state and the federal government.
So when you hear Omar say, he says trying to skirt around, so it means that the contributors that are trying to support my campaign are following the law. They're following the law. Again, that's their First Amendment right to support any candidate they choose. We follow all campaign finance reforms, because if we didn't, the Illinois State Board of Elections would be at our door, writing us up for some violations. So again, unlike my opponent who just received, and you heard him skirt around the fact that he wants to talk about property tax, he's going to raise your property taxes. And as a result, $20,000 from property tax attorneys, $20,000 from the vice mayor, Ray Suarez, and he talks about he doesn't owe anyone anything. He's going to owe. He just hasn't seen the bill yet. But let me just say this:
Omar, the money doesn't travel too far.
Can you repeat the question?
That was a loan.
Yeah,
The precincts on the north. What is your policy in accepting campaign donations from companies?
So again, I work for the taxpayers of the 36th ward, and so they will be first and foremost represented by myself. I want to make sure that, again, they have a voice. They're going to have a voice when I'm the alderman of the 36th ward. Campaign donors, they're allowed legally to contribute, but again, I was asked by the campaign finance reform to talk about the issues related to campaign finance reform. I think that we should follow New York's model and have a small matching donor program, so that way we can get these large contributors out of politics. But the reality is that those are the laws that the state of Illinois has passed, and as a result, we're following the law, and we're going to continue to follow the law.
Thank you. The precincts on the north end of the ward average around 300 voters, and the precincts on the south end of only average around 100 or so. How will you ensure that many money is fairly distributed to all areas of the ward based on need and not based solely on voting patterns? 1 minute, Gilbert.
So I've been saying from the get-go, I'm for what's called participatory budgeting. The way that I've divided the map, you have a north section, a western section, and a southern section. That participatory budgeting committee will have 2 members from each portion of the ward, and they will have equal voting powers. $1 million of that 1.3 million will be decided by the community, how we spend it. The other 300,000 will be set aside for contingencies in case there's any overruns, but we will also make sure that, again, in case some of these programs or some of these projects don't make the list, we have some additional funding there. But again, I'm for what's called participatory budgeting. This is your taxpayers. This is your taxpayer dollars. We want to make sure that you have a say in how these dollars are expended. So I'm for participatory budgeting. I'm looking forward to working with UIC to develop it. And again, democracy is a good thing.
Participatory budgeting is a farce. It's something that has been tried and has not worked. And if you look at the voting patterns alone, when people are more active in their community, they're able to participate in some of the meetings and do out the surveys and things like that. So if there is a portion of the ward that isn't able to do that, then they're not going to get those services. So if I live in the southern portion of the ward that hasn't been receiving much services throughout, we would want to make sure that we have an open discussion with all communities and with community groups and advisory committees. We're going to have public meetings when deciding what to use our discretionary funds in. But to say that participatory budgeting is going to represent anyone more equally, that's just a lie.
Do you plan on also running for 36 ward committeeman? 1 minute, Omar.
If elected, absolutely. And the reason is just because of what was just discussed earlier with the voting patterns. Unfortunately, in the 36th ward, there are certain precincts and portions of the ward that, especially when it has to do with communities that are working class families, for some reason, they do not participate as much in the democratic process of voting. And so I believe that is the job of the Democratic committeeman to work on. I want to work on that. I'm a young guy. I want to be able to reach out to the youth and talk about why it's important to be involved in your community, be involved in the democratic process. And not only, it's so discouraging that we see so many people that are eligible to vote and that have actively registered, but yet very few actually go and do their democratic duty and vote. And so if elected, I certainly would be running for committeeman.
My answer is yes. I'll definitely be running for committeeman. Again, I want to make sure that the residents of the 36th ward understand the political process. 20,000 people, or a little under 20,000 people are registered to vote. We saw about 7,000 come out to vote. And so we want to make sure that we're educating the public about the political process. We want to make sure that we're reaching out to everyone. Remember, the Democratic commitment also has a say in how these judges are selected. And we want to make sure that we're encouraging diversity on the bench. We want to make sure that we're encouraging diversity throughout the city of Chicago. So yes, I will be running for Democratic committeeman as well.
Currently, safe passage routes are planned out and drawn by CPS officials that don't live in the area. How are you going to ensure that principals, LSCs in the community are more involved in the safe passage process to ensure that those workers are placed in the locations that best maximize safety? 1 minute, Gilbert.
Right, so I found this out. I'm on the Steinmetz Local School Council as a community representative for the LSC, and so I've been working with Chief of Security, J.D. Chow, as well as the 25th Commander, Ms. Benya, to take a look at increasing some safe passages for the 36th Ward. But Alonzo, you are correct. This decision is made at the CPS level. And so again, working with Mrs. Chow, we've talked about some of the issues and some of the violence that has been occurring in the 36th Ward on the northwest side. We want to make sure that they understand that I'm going to be an advocate for making sure that our children are going to the schools that they feel safe.
when dealing with safe passage, we don't want to just have it to be a term, but actually something that's real. And so I will be working diligently with our administrators and our LSCs to make sure that they have a true voice with CPS, and that CPS isn't trying to do some top-down approach of how to tell our community members how it's more safe for them to put people wherever they please. We want to make sure that the administrators and parents that know the community well are the ones that can determine where these routes are being traveled by our students and where to place those safe passage workers. And so we also be working diligently with the commanders in the 25th and 16th district to also make sure that there's policing as well in those areas.
Many ward residents want to get involved in the community and have a say in what our taxpayer money is spent on. Outside of a political organization, what will you do to ensure that all residents, both young and old, have a real say and are involved in the civic process? 2 minutes, Omar.
Yeah, I believe this is exceptionally important in the 36th ward, specifically even now because of the fact that, when you create these maps, or when those powers that be that create these maps, they don't take community into account. So actually one of the forums that we were at previous to this was actually the Hermosa community, which is broken down into, I believe, 4 different wards. And so we want to make sure that, like I said, part of my proposal is having advisory councils and committees so that everyone in the 36th ward is able to participate, no matter if they supported me or not. If that has no matter, because we are there to represent everyone in our community. So I have actually already reached out to the gentlemen that were in this race previously, Alonzo and Chris Vittorio, who were 2 gentlemen that wanted to see some changes and actively work in their community. And I said, if elected, our doors would certainly be open to you. I would love to partner with you because you have a passion for our community as to why, and I want to make sure that we are all working together to push our community forward. And so with that said, actually Chris Vittorio has already endorsed my campaign, and so I'm looking forward to working with him for years to come. And I still, the offer is still there to Alonzo. I look forward to working with him in the future as well, as we are neighbors, and so I know he's a passionate person about the community here, not only in the 36th ward, but really on the northwest side. So another thing is that I would want to work with businesses and other organizations that not necessarily work just in the 36th ward, but in other areas that are neighboring. So in the other wards that cover the same communities that the 36th ward covers as well.
Do you want me to repeat it? Many ward residents want to get involved in the community and have a say on what our taxpayer money is spent on. Outside of a political organization, what will you do to ensure that all residents, both young and old, have a real say and are involved in the civic process?
Right. So this 36th ward race has created a lot of groups all of a sudden. So that's good because, again, the community wants to get involved. So I want to support and make sure that these groups have the necessary funding. I want to make sure that they're aware of some of the public dollars that are available to assist them with developing some of the programs. I want to make sure that we're educating the residents of the 36th ward about the civic process. Repeat that one more time.
Outside of a political organization, what will you do to ensure that all residents, both young and old, have a real say and are involved in the civic process?
You also mentioned about tax dollars, right? Yeah, right. So again, participatory budgeting, it's something that is very important. The way that the UIC, I've been working with UIC to develop the curriculum would really put it in a manner where all 3 sections have an equal voting power, and they have a say in how the menu money will be spent in the 36th ward. Again, this is their tax dollars. I want to make sure that they understand this is the most democratic process to allow the residents, the taxpayers of the 36th ward, to have a say in how their how their dollars are going to be spent in the 36th ward. So again, I'm all for democracy. I'm all for making sure that our office is transparent. I want to make sure that we're inclusive of the community. And so again, participatory budgeting is something that I'm a big fan of. It's not a farce. It's being used throughout the whole country. Chicago obviously is behind. We only have 4 wards that are available, that are working with participatory budgeting, but is doing very well on the West Coast.
The community has lost hundreds of trees over the last few years. What are you going to do to make sure that those trees are replaced? 1 minute, Gilbert.
So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're talking to those neighbors that that their trees were cut down, make sure that they do want a tree back there, because a lot of times these roots are causing problems with their plumbing and their pipes. So we want to make sure that they do want to have that tree replaced. If they don't want to have that tree replaced, I want to make sure that we're talking about community gardens. I want to make sure that we're talking about teaching our kids about the environment. I think this will be a good opportunity to talk about an arborist, making sure that they're familiar with that profession, making sure that they understand, again, that the environment is something that we hold sacred. We want to make sure that the kids understand that the environment is very important.
Trees has been a big, if you knock on doors as much as I have and you talk to residents in the 36th Ward, trees are a big thing. Tree trimming, the cutting down of trees, unfortunately, because of the emerald ash borer infestation that occurred on the Cook County's northwest side and impacted specifically the northwest side of Chicago especially. But as the city crews are sort of come late to actually trim them and cut them down, they're even more later into actually placing a new tree. So we want to make sure that we are working on our budget to have the adequate funding to not only be able to have accessible forestry departments that is responsive, not 3 years or 2 years behind, but that when you ask for something to be either trimmed or cut down, that there is a replacement tree when residents want that. And I know that's certainly a very big issue in the 36th Ward, and I know that because I've talked to a lot of residents here in the ward that want to see their trees back in front of their homes.
Some of the train lines running along the south end of the ward are causing damage to the foundations of residents' homes. How do you plan on addressing that? 1 minute, we'll start with Omar.
So we want to make sure that, if we have transportation that's going through our ward, either through trains, whatnot, that it does have an economic boon to our ward and our cities. We certainly want to have those train lines still there. If they're having an impact negatively in our community, we certainly want to hold those, either the private companies that are passing through there, through freight train, or if it's Metro and RTA and whatnot, and hold them accountable and make sure that there's a fund developed for those communities that are negatively impacted with their trains passing through the community. But certainly those trains have been always a great development for the 36th Ward, especially industrial, but also with being able to be able as transportation routes as well to and from downtown into the suburban area.
So the trains are a blessing and a curse. Chicago is the hub of the nation as it relates to transportation. 6 of the Class 1 railroads are located in the city of Chicago. Again, everything from the West Coast to the East Coast stops in Chicago. But if it's negatively impacting the residents of the 36th Ward and causing issues with people's properties, we want to make sure that we're calling in these railroads such as BNSF and Union Pacific and bringing them in to the table to talk about the issues that their trains are causing to our residents, and we want to make sure that they're held accountable. As it relates to Metro, we want to make sure, again, that they're traveling safely through these areas. I know that one of the big issues that I've heard knocking on doors is over there by Narragansett and McLean, where the trains are blowing the horns at all hours of the night, and that's something that as soon as I get in, I plan to work with Metro to talk about maybe a quiet zone in that area.
Felix, this will be 1 minute. Right. Entire streets on the north end and south end of the ward are being worked on simultaneously at the same time, and it's making lives harder for residents, parking and whatnot. How will you work with residents to make future construction projects that take up entire lengths of streets easier to handle?
So, again, as a deputy director of the Illinois Department of Transportation, the utilities, we need to make sure that they're communicating with CDOT. We need to make sure that, again, that there's some planning that's going on. What happens a lot and drives me crazy is when you'll see a street paved, and then maybe a couple of days later, the utility company's coming in and cutting it up, and then all of a sudden making the repairs when it was open prior to laying down the asphalt. They could have easily accessed that repair right there. But again, there's no communication, so we want to make sure that utilities, we want to make sure that the community is made aware of the issues. We want to also make sure that the utilities are giving us, our office, enough notice so that way we can spread the word to the residents that there's some issues coming up. We want to make sure that CDOT is communicating with our office so that way, again, we can in turn communicate with the community that these types of projects will be going on so that way they can make some adjustments.
And Alonso, I apologize, you were talking about specifically work on streets and its impact on parking, you're saying?
Yeah, if you look at the 54 to 5900 block of West Henderson and also down here by Dickens, entire streets are being worked on at the same time with no notice to.
Yeah, absolutely. As it comes to that, actually, it's ironic that you asked that question, as we received a phone call just last week on that issue alone. And so it's the major thing is communication. Having open communication with the residents in your ward, and also with the those that are doing some sort of work in the ward. Sometimes it could be CDOT. In certain areas right now, it's People's Gas, and what people get frustrated with mostly is that they don't know which direction things are going in. They don't know the timetable behind the work that's being done. They don't know the purpose of some of the work sometimes, and so it's able to have a office that is able to work with all these entities and communicate to the residents in the ward and let them know how long they should be expecting to work and so forth. The problem is that if you ask some of these people that work for People's Gas specifically, they are hired out, contracted out workers that come from Wisconsin that quite honestly do not know how long they're going to be in the area that they're working in at the time. So it's being able to translate that message to our residents.
Pastor Floyd has the final question of the night.
I wanted to ask just a simple question. We always talk about debates and politics, and you hear all the time the separation of church and politics, if you would. In our neighborhoods, I think that our neighborhood that is founded on church ethics, what are you going to do to bring back that community awareness of God and togetherness? Does that make sense?
I believe I understand your questioning, and so there is a separation of church and state for the most part, but I believe though that the church, like our schools and other community centers in a community, have much more purpose than just serving as just a church and whatnot, but you are also an active member of this community. And so one of the things that I propose is that I would love for our office to not only work, to work with you, to work with the other churches that are nearby in this community. One of the things that we did is that I was, someone reached out to me because of my spirit, specifically with the Congresswoman's office, and it was called the Korean American Friendship Network, and they had a donation that was given. They do this in several cities, several times, once a year during the holidays, and they give out a certain amount of coat, so you do a coat drive, and they asked Omar, we'd like to do this on the Northwest side, so we partnered with several of the churches in doing things like that and having this coat drive in the Northwest side. So it's working on things like that, and also seeing that if we can partner together, if there's a resident in the community that needs some assistance, knowing that you all will be available to help as well.
So churches are a very important part of the 36th Ward. Again, the separation of church and state. But again, when those issues come up, what I do is I advise the churches that, again, they should have maybe a not-for-profit section, a 501c3, because there's a lot of times when the churches are providing services for the community, but again, they're not able to provide as many services as possible because, again, their funds are limited. So I educate the churches in the 36th Ward and talk to them about, maybe having a not-for-profit arm, because again, a lot of people come to the community, they come to their church, because again, those are anchors in the community, and I want to make sure that they're well aware of the public dollars that are available, because the services that they provide are invaluable.
All right, thank you again to Pastor Floyd for being so helpful in this process. On the back of your agenda, you will all find information on how to join the Bel-Montclare Community Organization on Facebook. We will be having many events this coming summer, and we hope you can be a part of it. We'd also like to thank Omar Aquino and Gilbert Villegas for attending tonight's forum. And please don't forget to vote on Election Day on April 7, and please give the two candidates a round of applause.